Now, let me analyze specific examples, English example to show interpersonal metaphor in action. Example number 1. The result suggests that fiscal interventions are likely to produce variable outcomes. Here we have the projection. Result suggests a mental process with non-human sensor. Results cannot actually suggest anything. It is a numerical metaphor. The coding, as you can see on the screen, shows median probability through metaphorical projection with objective orientation. This creates what Martin and White call here heteroclastic expansion, and is open dialectic space for alternative views while maintaining authorial stance. For the second example, it appears that environmental regulations have the potential to stimulate innovation. We have double metaphor here. First, it appears empty, theme with relational process completely impersonal. Then potential, nominalized modality as processed attribute, who thinks it appears, whose assessment of potential completely obscure, right? These strategies create maximum interpersonal distance. The writer presents subjective probability assessments as if they emerge from the data itself, not from human interpretation. This is heteroclastic expansion in appraisal terms, the entertain option that acknowledges other voices while maintaining scholarly authority. Vietnamese shows contrasting strategies that reflect different cultural academic values. Now let's look at the first example we have here. Chính phủ cần đẩy mạnh đầu tư vào cơ sở hạ tầng. This example can be literally translated into English as the government needs must strengthen in investment in infrastructure. This the serious construction cần phải is impossible in English, as must need to is ungrammatical in English. This creates emphatic obligation through doubling. Despite being two modal elements, we code it as the concurrent because it is direct modal expression, not metaphorical packaging. We have the second example. Kết quả nghiên cứu chỉ ra rằng việc cải cách chính sách tiền tệ là cần thiết để kiểm soát lạm phát trong bối cảnh hiện nay. This can be translated into English as research results point out that a monetary policy reforms is necessary to control inflation in the current context. Here we have projection. But note that the verbal process chỉ ra point out rather than the mental process suggest. More assertive, more direct. The nominalization vì cải cách maintain process orientation while creating grammatical participant. Vietnamese strategy shows explicit agency. A model intensification through serialization and direct deontic positioning. This reflects economics as applied policy science in the Vietnamese context, where clear directives are valued over hedged propositions. On the screen, we are having the typological constraints on metaphorical potential between English discourse and Vietnamese discourse. English has rich derivational morphology to show the possibility, likelihood, necessity, which is very productive, which shows the productive nominalization. It has dummy subjects enabling interpersonal constructions, the complex complementation with that class, and infinitive enabled projections. This allowed what we call the metaphor cascade, multi-layers of metaphor. However, with Vietnamese, an isolating language, we lack derivational morphology. We have the limited nominalization. The topic prominence resists dummy subjects. No infinities or no that complementation means that we have different projection strategies. Serious verbs provide an alternative resource for our constructing the experience. Look at these Look at these specific contrast. Nominalizations is very productive in English but limited in Vietnamese. Impers- um, Impersonal construction, which is very natural in English but marked in Vietnamese language. However, modal harmony very restricted in English. For example, we cannot say may possibly in English, but this phenomenon is very productive in Vietnamese, as we can say có thể sẽ. Okay, so we have some double modal auxiliaries here. The theoretical implication is that a grammatical metaphor is not equally available across the languages. This challenges the universalist claims about scientific discourse require grammatical metaphor. Perhaps they are an alternative path to abstraction and technicality. Now we move on to talk about the register ideology and model choice. These patterns reflect the ideological orientation to knowledge and authority. Now let's look at English first. English academic discourse emerged from empiricist SP's terminology, the knowledge as probabilistic requiring evidence. Liberal discourse ethics values multiple viewpoints. Peer review culture necessitates anticipating criticism. And the formula here is that is modularization plus metaphor equals maximum interpersonal distance. This creates the scholarly persona we recognize, cautious but rigorous, protecting faith while making claim. However, with Vietnamese academic discourse, it reflects different values. Pragmatic orientation sees economics as serving development. Collective decision making requires clear directives. Development discourse create urgency for transformation. Confucian traditions value transmission of authoritative knowledge. The formula that we have is modulation plus concurrence equals direct deontic positioning. This creates a different persona. The authoritative guide provide clear direction. So we can see that neither approach is superior. They are different cultural solutions to academic communication, but this creates the challenges for Vietnamese scholars to seek international publication. Our findings have some important implications for SFL theory. First of all, for grammatical metaphor theories, it needs the typological crowding. We cannot assume all languages have a equal metaphorical potential. Some languages may achieve abstraction through different means. Second, with a register theory, it must be better integrate the cultural context. The same register and economic abstract shows divergent patterns cross-linguistically. Cultural values co-constitute register alongside situational variables. Thirdly, the modularization versus modulation distinction may reflect deeper cultural orientations to knowledge and action, not just semantic universals. Fourthly, the relationship between grammatical metaphor and heteroclassic positioning varies culturally. English uses metaphor for diaclogic expansion, whereas Vietnamese maintain more monoclassic assertion despite having metaphorical resources. These findings do not invalidate SFL theory but enrich it, showing how universal potential is culturally instantiated. In addition, our methodology serves several innovations for SFL research. The multi-stratal coding captures the simultaneous choice at semantic, lexical, grammatical, and discourse semantic levels. This enables complex analysis while maintaining systematicity. We follow and extend Feng Yung's approach. We map model choices onto the generic stages, revealing functional specialization across linguistic correlations. The integration of quantitative and qualitative analysis allows pattern detection while maintaining semantic interpretation. This is neither pure corpus linguistics nor pure discourse analysis, but something uniquely SFL meaning-focused empirical research. For our colleagues who are planning to do constructive work, this provides a replicable model that operationalizes the theoretical categories while maintaining theoretical depth. Examine the paradigmatic relations, review different organizational principles in each language. Well, English developed its probability paradigm through the lexical choice and grammatical what we can see here. Grammatical metaphor here. Oh my god, it has something to do here. Okay. The vertical axis shows decreasing probability. The horizontal axis shows the increasing metaphoricity. This creates a rich paradigms with delicate options. However, with the Vietnamese model paradigm, as we can see, the obligation paradigm is more elaborated than English. Vietnamese use the serious combination to create intermediate values, like cần phải sits between cần and phải in obligatory force. This demonstrates that action, the paradigmatic relations between options differ cross-linguistically. Both languages achieve semantic delicacy, but through different structural means. English through metaphor, and Vietnamese through combination and lexical elaboration. Um, with the logo genetic unfolding, meaning how meaning develops through the text, shows strategic deployment of model resources. With English abstract progression, English abstract typically begins with the high modularization, establishing the tentative crowd. For example, we can say research suggests or may indicate. These expressions maintain modularization through findings with careful calibration. The shift to weak modulation in discussion, like policymakers might consider. This creates the cautious hedge personnel throughout. However, with Vietnamese abstract progression, like we start with factual establishment with less model marking in the opening moves. We use projection for findings, attributing assessment to research result, then shift to the strong modulation in discussion, like chính phủ cần phải, translated into English as the government must. This creates an authoritative guide persona. These aren't random distributions but strategic deployments serving rhetorical purposes. The accumulation of model choices construct different relationship with readers and knowledge. We can model interpersonal distance as a climb from the maximum subjectivity to maximum objectivity. Each step removes the speaker's writer as source of assessment, like I think explicitly subjective, will properly implicitly subjective, is likely to objectively objectively implicit evidence suggests, so objectively explicit in with external source. English exploit full climb, particularly the intermediate objectifying strategies. Vietnamese cluster as the extremes, neither highly subjective through model auxiliaries or high objective through research attribution. We have less use of intermediate strategies. This reflects the different cultural solution to the same functional pressure, how to make claims while maintaining interpersonal relationships, and both achieve academic credibility through different positioning strategies. We also propose a three-dimensional model of model choice. Model choice equals the system. Model choice equals a function of system, structure, and context. The systemic dimension involves optional. The systemic dimension involves option in the language system. The structural dimension encompasses the typological affordances and constraints. The context dimension includes register, cultural ideology, and generic conventions. Although these three interact dynamically, you cannot predict the model choices from one dimension alone. The model, therefore, makes testable prediction, like isolating languages should shows lower metaphorical percentages, and policy-oriented register should favor the modulation cross-linguistically. Academic globalization should increase adoption of English patterns. This move beyond description to explanation, integrating different levels of SFL theory and providing a framework for future research. For Vietnamese scholars writing in English, we need consciousness raising about metaphorical patterns. Transformation exercises are crucial, converting Vietnamese preferences like chính sách này cần được thực hiện to English preferences like implementation of this policy is necessary. The model value calibration, moving from high modulation to medium modulation, projection strategies using evidence searches rather than we must. Following the Sydney School genre pedagogy, deconstruction of the model text, joint construction, practicing pattern, independent construction, apply strategies. The goal isn't replacing Vietnamese pattern, but develop bilingual model competence strategic choice based on audience and purposes. So this word opens multiple research potentials. Our studies provide empirical validation of key SFL concepts while maintaining maintaining the necessary refinements. Now, our study provides empirical validation of the SFL key concept while suggesting necessary refinements. We confirm the semantic basic of grammatical categories, the register sensitivity of grammatical metaphor, and cultural specificity of meaning-making resources. But we also show that metaphor theory needs typological crowding. Register theory needs better cultural integration, and model systems vary in their architecture cross-linguistically. By extending the SFL to Vietnamese, we contribute multilingual projects that enrich our understanding of human making potential. As Halliday said, a theory is only as good as its description. So each language teaches something new about how humans make meaning. Let me conclude by emphasizing that the model metaphor is not merely a linguistic resource, but a means of cultural semiotics. English employs modalization plus metaphor to create negotiated knowledge. Vietnamese employs modulation plus concurrence to create direct action. Both serve their discourse communities effectively. These patterns reveal how different cultures construe the relationship between language, the knowledge, the social action. They show that the economic discourse, the academic discourse far from being universal and culturally variable in fundamental ways. So each language offers a unique window to meaning-making potential. While without Vietnamese, we may assume English patterns are universal. Without English, we may miss the role of grammatical metaphor in scientific discourse. As Holiday and Martin noted, grammatical metaphor is foundational to scientific discourse. Our work shows is realized differently across the language, with multiple paths to abstraction and technicality. Therefore, understanding these differences are crucial to our globalized academic discourse. We have some selected reference posted here to confirm and inform our study. The full list of reference will be put in the proceedings. Thank you so much for your attention. And this is the end of our presentation today.